All right, we're moving forward. We're going to go back to our original agenda where we're on legislative session report. Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings and Director Van Holten, you guys, you're ready. If I remember right, a handoff was going to go to Director Van Holten on some items. I believe that's where we were at.
Jeff was going to review 3 bills, and I was going to end with the review of about 5 bills, and then we were going to be open for questions. So I think that's all we have left.
Okay, so well, let's just dive in. Wasn't a Director Van Holten, wasn't he next in your queue on the presentation? Okay.
Okay, hello everyone, good to be here again. I'm going to cover a few bills right now and then pass it back to Angie, as she just mentioned. So the first one I'm going to cover is Senate Bill 107. And just to kind of highlight the question that Board Member Ver had asked in terms of did these bills change in the last bit of the session, this is an example of a bill that did change multiple times, and actually it was the 7th substitute that ended up passing. So it is a different version of the bill than you last heard in your final legislative meeting. That being said, what changed in this bill was all related to higher education, and it was not related to K-12. But the K-12 piece does remain as you last heard it in your final legislative meeting regarding the thresholds that schools have to meet in order to start doing the test to stay program. So you'll see here in the box that if you are at 2% of positive cases, you begin testing. And then if you were at 30 cases, if you're at a smaller school, it would be test to stay. House Bill 42, the Education Agency Report Process Amendment. This was one of the trios of Representative Pulsipher's reporting bills in response to the reporting audit. This is the one that requires that USBE have some internal process when they're creating administrative rules to evaluate if there is a report or an impact to that report. And we have already begun discussing that process and how we will handle that. It also deleted, I think, about 5 reports that were in code that were no longer needed. We'll just jump down to the final one that I'm going to cover for you all, and that's Senate Bill 160, the state audit amendments. This one doesn't really do anything to the state board, but it does do things to LEAs. It now allows the legislative auditor to perform audits on appropriations that are received by LEAs. This is new. LEAs have not been subject to the legislative auditor's office power and authority before. So this now opens that up. And we have been told by the state auditors or the legislative auditor's office that they're not entirely sure how many they will be able to do, but this is something that will start coming forward. LEAs will now be getting audited by the legislative office. And with that, I'll pass it back to Angie for the rest of the bills.
Thank you, Jeff. So the last 6 bills actually that I'll mention are in front of you, and one that's not on the list. SB 178, you'll remember, is the bill that allows LEAs to convert or use 35% of their restricted funds in an unrestricted manner, or as if they were unrestricted funds. And that's for this school year or fiscal year 21 only. It also delays a school fees requirement for 1 year. That requirement was that the amount that's charged to students may not be in excess of what the cost of the activity was. So that will be delayed until 22-23 school year. HB 425 is a bill you may remember that we requested. It codifies state funds management and monitoring standards, as well as creates a reserve fund called the Charter School Closure Reserve Fund to pay the amounts owed to the federal or state government after a charter school closes, after all other assets and funds have been tapped into or utilized. And the $1 million one time was also appropriated to begin this amount for that reserve fund. The last 3, if you could scroll down a little bit, Jeff, thank you. SB 142, this bill is the bill that codifies and requires the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee to do a review or evaluation of our public finance or public education funding. It also enacted the WPU add-on in lieu of the line item for, remember we had the enhancement for at-risk students program. Now that is a WPU add-on to support students who are at risk of academic failure. And there was some money appropriated to that to hold those, our districts and our charter schools harmless from the change of the line item to the add-on. HB 323, bill that allows because of our assessment anomalies over last year, we weren't able to provide the stipends this last year for under the High Poverty Schools Teacher Bonus Program. And that program relies on 2 years of data because it's mainly reliant on growth. And so this bill was passed, which creates a mechanism for USBE to help and for LEAs to provide these incentives this fall, notwithstanding the assessment anomalies. And then second to last, HB 421 created the Intensive Services Pilot Program for 3 years, and there was $1 million appropriated for that. We're all very familiar with this program. It provides resources to LEAs or reimbursement for costs that LEAs incurred for student services for students who are high cost, generally more than 3 times the cost of a normal WPU. And then the last one that's not on our list, but we've received a number of questions, so I just wanted to mention it before we end, is HB 294. There's been some confusion about language on or around lines 57 through 62 and about whether this now requires LEAs to determine on their own whether they're going to require masks in school. The language, there's a portion in there, as you may know, that terminates essentially any statewide mask mandates on April 10th, but that does not apply to public health orders that govern K-12 schools. So you can see on lines 57 through 60 that notwithstanding the rest of the bill, that a public health order issued by the Department of Health that pertains to public health safety measures in a K-12 school may remain in place through July 1 of 2021. So there's no need for our LEAs to worry or wonder whether they need to make a determination about that. We understand right now, we believe that the Department of Health plans to continue that mask mandate in schools through July 1 of 2021. And so that is the end of the bill review. The next page of the quick guide just shows again all of the positions you took, and I really appreciate that Jeff gave a shout out to Jill Curry and Barbara Fuentes for all of the work they did on the quick guide. There are so many people in our office who also need, as you can imagine, that work so hard to support the board's tracking of the session. Sybil Child, Mark Peterson, Del Frost, so many others in the office staff. We couldn't even name them all. It really does take our whole agency to support the tracking of these bills, the supporting of committees, and providing all the information for you. So just, we want to, even though, you know, Jeff, Dale, Deputy Superintendent Jones, Superintendent Dixon, et cetera, and I get to be the face of talking about these things with you all, there really is a huge group of people behind us that really make all the work related to the session possible. So thank you. And Chair Huntsman, we are done at this point, unless you have any questions.
We have some questions. So thank you. Board Member Hart.
I'm deeply concerned about enforcing a mask mandate after August or after April 10th. Quite honestly, I don't think that it was considered how that is going to impact schools. And I'm, as a practitioner, I'm not sure how to advise constituents or my own staff when students wear a mask in school, but go to Target or the movies or whatever and don't have to. And I am deeply concerned about the difference between the two. I don't know if we can do anything about that. But I just don't even know how I'll get instruction done the last 2 months of school. It is that dire. I fully expect that students will abandon their mask. I feel like parents will abandon their mask, and I'm not sure what type of guidance that the state board will give schools or administrators. I cannot express how deeply problematic this is right as we go into standardized testing time, to the point where I don't know if it can be done. I just want that on record.
Okay, Superintendent Dixon. You're
Thank
muted.
you, Mr. Chair. Just in response to Board Member Hart, I hear you, Board Member Hart, and I took personal privilege not to speak on behalf of the board, but express my concern when an earlier version of the bill was being heard in a House Health and Human Services Committee. I think two things that will be helpful. Governor Cox has been doubling down on making sure that the public is aware that the mask mandate will continue through July 1. The health department is updating their manual. They I think they have put out some guidance or are working on some guidance. And Angela Dunn and others continue to speak about school mask mandate being in place, as well as for gatherings over 50. So one of the things that I think will help when schools start planning spring events, graduation, other activities, I'm already seeing plans that have been floated around by some of our LEAs for those events that require a mask. So I think there will be multiple ways to make sure that that message gets out there. I think the enforcement certainly is a challenge because when you have a state that has one, that is loosened up on a mask mandate on certain conditions, then it seems that it would follow everywhere. But businesses will still be requiring masks. And I think both our governor and the health department will continue to message that and send out guidance to try and support our schools.
Thank you.
Member Straight.
So anyone who's commenting on the mask issue, let's have them talk first, but I have the same concerns as Board Member Hart. I have so many of my students, for example, that work in restaurants and fast food places, and I'm going to tell them they have to wear their mask in school, but I don't know. Anyway.
Okay, Member Earl.
Yeah, my comments along the same lanes too. We're not seeing the spread in our schools, especially our elementary schools, and we've got our teachers who are receiving vaccinations. If they're not already done, most of those are already done. And so I think it's gonna be more complicated and difficult to continue to convince the public that this is, I'm not saying Cox isn't gonna double down, the governor probably will, but what I'm saying is that there's these things we put into place so that we can ease the restrictions. And I just think students, there's a benefit to them being able to see their teachers and being able to get engaged that way. And so I think we're going to see increased pressure from families and others really, pushing back and asking what this is about and why we're doing it.
Board Member Norton. You're muted, and yeah.
Amen, amen, and amen. Even the most compliant are at the ultimate breaking point with the mask. I would ask, however, I've also been hearing that there's a high likelihood that they are going to open immunization up to all adults April 1st. And I am wondering, if we can get this vaccination under control, if there is a chance that that would even shorten this timeline.
Well, there's a lot of things are possible. A lot of things can happen between now and April 10th. Well, I think it'll be interesting as we play this out. I'm just wondering what I'm going to do with all this hand sanitizer and these massive packages of masks that I've purchased. But maybe I can sell them on a discount or something. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Usually at this time, board members, I'm not opening up a Pandora's box or anything, but usually at this time we're in a position if there's any bills that we need to veto. But the good news was that everything that we previously opposed and worked hard at making sure it didn't happen. None of those are eligible to be vetoed because they didn't pass. So we'll just continue on our agenda here.